In this video, I am going to be talking about one of the most, if not the most, horrifying backstage incidents in the history of professional wrestling. A while ago, WWE Hall of Famer The Undertaker went on a rant and blasted soft wrestlers who played video games all day. The Phenom received massive backlash from fans and many wrestlers for his comments. Years later, he said that he was in the wrong. In his controversial comments, The Undertaker was basically saying that the wrestlers, the backstage environment, the backstage culture of pro wrestling had changed quite a lot and wrestlers were now soft. Many fans then reminded The Undertaker that what used to happen back in the day in the wrestlers' locker rooms. New wrestlers, rookies, used to be bullied by older guys in backstage rooms. JBL, former WWE champion, was one such guy, one such wrestler who used to bully his co-workers, especially the newer ones. So the incident I am going to be talking about involves WWE Hall of Famers, the Steiner brothers, Rick Steiner and Scott Steiner. About 2 years ago, former WCW President Eric Bischoff told this story on a podcast. This absolutely horrifying story about the Steiner brothers and a referee who he said was probably Nick Patrick, one of the most famous referees in wrestling and WWE history. Fans of this channel are aware that I am not a big fan of Eric Bischoff. In fact, I hate Eric Bischoff. And these comments of his are one of the big reasons why I do that. In that podcast, Eric Bischoff told a story about his first meeting with the Steiner brothers when they were sexually assaulting a referee. So here's what he said. So I go into this room, this big room where the guys are dressing, and I see both Steiners, Rick Steiner and Scott Steiner, have a referee in their hands. And for the life of me, I'm not sure who it was. I wanna say it was Nick Patrick, but I could be wrong. But anyway, they had this referee and they had him duct taped up like a mummy. They had duct tape around his mouth. His hands were duct taped to the sides of his hips and his legs. His feet were duct taped together as well. And he was buck ass naked and had a pencil stuck up his ass. And I thought, wow, this is gonna be a hell of a gig. And Eric Bischoff laughed. Eric Bischoff laughed while telling a story about two wrestlers basically sodomizing a referee. So here's what he said next. That's my first recall of the Steiner brothers. And I'm sure the referee, whoever it was, whether it was Nick Patrick or whoever, must have done something that the Steiner brothers found worthy of some sort of Steiner retribution. This is why you can never take Eric Bischoff, this old piece of shit, seriously. So here's what he said next. But they tortured him. It was, all I wanna say, in good fun for those who were watching. Eric Bischoff laughed again. Who knows what he did to deserve such a response? I'm not sure. I didn't see it. I just saw the aftermath and I thought, man, I'm gonna be really careful around these two guys. I have read a lot of incidents, a lot of stories about backstage brawls, backstage fights, backstage bullying in WWE, WCW, and other pro wrestling history. But this particular incident about the Steiner brothers sodomizing a referee with a pencil, this one takes the cake. There's nothing more disturbing than this one. How did Reddit react to this story? These comments by Eric Bischoff. Let's check it out. Isn't there a Nash interview where he mentions this and says something like, you know, that's a felony, right? WWE are going to have to remove so many people from the network that the archive will just be Scotty to Hotty versus Funaki matches. I remember someone in one of these threads being like, Scott Steiner is one of the good ones. The meme of Scott must have given people beer goggles on how bad he used to be out of the ring. I respect the Steiners' in-ring work, but they have always come off as massive douche frat boys to me, beating and abusing people just because they knew they could. How can these dumb fucks say tortured him and it was in good fun in the same context and still don't come to senses? You know, the more I think about it, maybe Braun Breaker isn't so bad of a name. In hindsight, it is baffling what was considered normal behavior 20 to 30 years ago. On the other hand, I don't know if the good old times are really over, or if some people just got better at covering it up. If this was a story told about the Steiners torturing a female referee, it would have been seen as horrifying from the moment it was told. Instead, because it was a man, it was just locker room boys will be boys hilarity. That's what's truly fucked up to me. Just that little twist of context, and suddenly it was supposed to be funny. Pritchard and Conrad used to sell a shirt for the podcast that had a group of Sharpies rubber banded together and the words Steinerized over it in the Shoney's font. Apparently, they shoved multiple Sharpies up someone else's ass in the WWF, and Conrad Thompson thought of a way to make money off of that. The Steiners duct taped Oscar, man on a mission manager, to a pissoir and peed on him. His only way to escape to wait until the tape was drenched. Fuck this behavior. Not seeing people mention it, but if this was Nick Patrick, he is one of the all time great heel refs and probably on the Mount Rushmore of refing, depending on who you ask. Bischoff even says he is not sure of the name, but that name stuck out since Patrick isn't some random person but a guy who did an entire NWO pay per view. My respect for the Steiners has drastically gone down. Boys will be boys. The amount of flat out victim blaming in these stories is just horrendous. I am sure the referee must have done something that the Steiners found worthy of some sort of Steiner retribution. Who knows what it did to deserve such a response? God, and that's what they did as mature adults. Can you imagine what they did as kids to some poor freshman wrestler? Imagine playing video game instead low-key torturing someone. Miss the good old days, hey Undertaker. They raped a man with a foreign object. The Steiners are rapists. Bischoff witnessed a rape and did nothing. Jesus Christ. Wrestling culture was fucking terrible across the board. Fucking maniacs and predators around. Even Mick Foley in his first book has written about the Steiner brothers' tendency to get rough with enhancement talent. And Mick Foley has not written a bad word about any of his wrestling colleagues except Ric Flair. But that was about Rick the Booker in that book. Man, it seems like The Undertaker wants this new crop of wrestlers to stop playing video games and stick stuff up each other's asses instead. Some sort of Steiner retribution. Is that what we are calling it now? Oh, I'm sorry, officer. I wasn't sexually assaulting that woman. I was carrying out some sort of retribution. Every single story that comes out paints everyone like an asshole except the victim, of course. The Steiners are pieces of shit. But Bischoff is also a piece of shit. How can Eric see that and be like, lol, gotta be careful around them. They are into dealing out some retribution. I just don't get it. Having a pencil stuck up your ass is potentially dangerous. You could get infected. What a dumb prank. Yikes. Never heard this one before. Although shoving pencils up another man's ass seems incredibly Scott Steiner. They are both highly educated in hazing from Michigan. Imagine being Nick Patrick in this situation and your boss comes in and you think, finally, he'll say something to these pricks and they will stop sexually assaulting me. But instead, your boss just sort of laughs it off and leaves.